what motivated you to start 8B Investments?
Africa is full of brilliance.
Absolutely.
Every corner you look.
Absolutely.
And yet when I'm abroad, people look at me like I'm an exception. And what I have to remind them is like, you have no idea. There is so much more where I come from. And I'm here because of a series of lucky accidents that, you know, could have unfolded very differently. Currently, if you're a smart African student, it is assumed that if you're good enough, you will get a scholarship. What we forget is that scholarship dollars are not designed to meet demand. There are so many ways of cutting this cake to fit the philanthropist's needs and interests that it does not solve the demand problem. And let's think about the demand problem for a second. We have the youngest continent in the world. We are young, and we have to assume that brilliance, meaning how many smart people per, you know, in a population, is just as evenly distributed on the African continent as it is in, you know, Oxfordshire and Ithaca, New York. And if that's the case, the fact that there are so many students on the African continent that we are not investing in helping realize their potential is actually a failure in our imagination as a world. So it's really clear, it's really important to clarify that the kind of brilliance we have on the continent completely eclipses any philanthropic solution that there is out there. Then the second thing about philanthropy, of course, is that there's so many competing causes. And I've spent a lot of time in the diplomacy space, in the international development space. And I'm so aware of just how much need there is for resources there. And so there's just no way we could be competing with that. And so it made so much sense that I would set up 8B primarily as a funding vehicle for African students who are going to global universities. And here it's really important for me to say that it is not a charity. So we are not taking Lydia to Oxford and taking that money away from, you know, a village girl in Lydia's village who should be going to primary school and has no money. No, this is a market-based solution. We're getting investment dollars in this. This is money that would not be availed for anything else other than a solution like this, probably in a place like Southeast Asia. Now we're telling those investors, take that money and use it for the African continent to unleash the brilliance there.
So just tell me a bit how the business works, how the business model works. Yeah.
The lending is a very plain vanilla lending program. We are the first company to focus exclusively on African students going to global universities and to have an American bank working with us. So the way the business works is that a student finds out about us either because the university has heard about us, because universities have a pain point where they're admitting very many people like you and me, but those folks they're admitting do not have the money, and the university cannot be as generous as, you know, a Cornell or, you know, partly an Oxford was in my case. And so you have all these students holding offers. Universities have spent so much money to get them there, and the student can't show up. And therefore, when they know about us, they're able to tell their African admitted students, hey guys, there is an entity here that can help you. And they can also tell their ongoing students, you know, you might be running into a cash crunch because the CD dollar rate has gone where it's gone, and parents who were initially paying cannot afford anymore. Here is a place that you might look for financing. And so then that's how the students get to know about us. Students can also get to know about us from social media and from other places where we're being talked about on the continent, because this is truly game-changing. And so when they know about us, they then come to the 8B platform and they make an application. And what's really important is what kind of program are they going to, because our initial focus is students who are going into what we call, or what are called, STEM designated programs. In the US, those are programs that allow you to stay for a total of 3 years without needing any different visa, if you will, after graduation. So if a student is going into a STEM designated program into one of the roughly 420 universities in the US that we partner with, it's really important for students to know that not all schools are created equal. So we shorten that path for them by telling them, here are our schools. These are schools that we know have good outcomes. So students go, they make an application. If they succeed, they show up in school. We work through something called a financial aid management system to transfer money after the university has confirmed registration of the student and that all documentation is in order. And then the student pays interest only while they're in school. And that is because it's really important to build a credit history. Nobody tells you this when you're graduating university in Kenya, that your A is not going to enable you to, buy a car or get a mortgage for your house. It's your credit history that is going to enable you to do that. So we're helping them build a credit history. And then they pay interest only while in school. And then after they graduate 6 months out, we want them to start paying principal and interest. And we think 6 months out is a good period when they would have a job. And then their loans are 8 years long. And that's how the business works. The reason why we called the company 8B, there's several. One of them is just back of envelope math. If we want African numbers in the US to look the way China numbers look in the US, we kind of need an investment of roughly $8 billion worth in student financing for the students to show up. That's not a big number. It's 300,000 students. The financing is a really important piece, but what I haven't mentioned is our upstream work in going to Kisii University, the place where my father was working in the late 70s, and letting the students know that we can help them for free on our platform to know how to apply, where to apply through boot camps and information sessions. And for me, it's really important that we're doing that everywhere, not just at the capitals, because I was not raised in a capital. I was raised in the bush, right? So that's the upstream work that we do. And then the downstream work for students that already are in the global universities is, how do you make understandable the rules of the game about how you succeed professionally, how you get a job? How do you teach a student who knows how to get an A that actually you will proceed faster in your career if you go for the happy hour instead of staying at your desk writing the report, because that's just how the rules work.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is there anywhere else in the world that has this model that you're doing?
Not for education finance. Things like this are done for agriculture. They are done for reconstruction of countries, like in places. And that's why for me, what it was really important is to see how do we solve the problem of a very big risk premium that gets in the way of unlocking financial access. So there are models like this elsewhere. Our innovation really, our innovation is an adaptation of that into education. And
what's your justification for saying, well, this is not a brain drain from Africa, brains that Africa desperately needs to, to actually become equal to others?
I've managed to persuade a bank from Utah and Nebraska to think that Africa is the future for their bank. So this is brain circulation. This is how Africa belongs in the world. Africa is not a corner that we act on, save, and come back home and feel comfortable about. We don't have enough jobs being created on the continent to meet all this incredibly smart young people graduating from our universities, much less the ones who don't even go into university because we don't have enough classroom space. Let me just tackle this problem at the very end, where they're already leaving university. They managed to get in there and there are no jobs, right? So at that level, what we're telling our students, and I've been to university career centers across Nairobi, for example, and they say, well, there are no jobs. When you graduate, you must be an entrepreneur. Try not to end up on a boda boda. Boda boda are
the bikes,
the bikes. Do you know how you end up not being on a boda boda or having one of those one-man jobs? Is if you can raise capital for the problem that you're looking to solve. Do you know how you raise capital? If you have access to networks. Do you know the best way to have access to networks is a global education? It's just like anywhere else. Raising money is based on trust. If I don't know you, it doesn't matter that you're the best person out of USIU or out of JKU at, I've never heard of you. I will lend to a third-rate idea of somebody who comes from the local school whose father is my golf partner, or who's, what I mean? It's relationship building. We need to be getting closer and closer to where the capital is. And we do that by being in the classrooms and creating connections. And then that circulates, right? We identify problems here that are connected to problems at home. Now we have the money to solve them. We go home, we create these companies, we employ people, and Africa becomes part of the world.
How many students are your customers, I would say, or clients at the moment?
The students who we're helping with applications, and we have 200,000 students on our platform, 200,000. We have students who are in loan application modality, and there is about $60 million worth of loan demand. We have roughly 100 mentors. that we're working with. We have dozens of schools that are excited about the partnership. And when we speak next time, I'll tell you what that looks like. Right now, we've approved about $4 million worth of loans. We expect that number to be closer to 10 million by the time this lending season is done.
What would you wake up one day and say, that's success?
What success looks like for me, Rosalind, is when an African student can walk into Kenya Commercial Bank or, EcoBank or, Stanbic and get a loan to study in SOAS, in Oxford, in NYU. Students in India can do that today. Students on the African continent cannot. The result of this is that you will run into somewhere between, somewhere around 25 Indian graduate students in the US before you run into your first African graduate student here. That is completely skewed. We are punching below our ability and our possibilities, our potential. And so, changing that isn't us. We are the first ones out of the door to say this can be done and this is how it might be done, and demonstrating that African students can be good stewards of credit just like students from other regions are. And once we do that successfully, we want the doors to be flung open and for African brilliance to truly have a global reach.